Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Hey, now the G5 is complete, I thought now would be a good time to take a step back and re-rank all the Warpets on the tier list here. Now, when we're doing these rankings, we always look for two things. First is the power of the Warpet. I think that's pretty straightforward. But the second thing we're looking for is the viability of the Warpet going forward. If you have a Warpet that works okay now, but it's attached to a hero pair that, frankly is probably going to get benched pretty soon, then that Warpet's going to get a much lower ranking. On the other hand, if the Warpet has sort of a similar level of power, but it's going to stick around in the meta for a long time, we'd rank it much higher, right? So let's start with the G1 infantry pets, and we'll start with the Friendship Bear. Friendship Pair, really, really built for Guardwood. Not great. It does have one limited niche use. If you are in a Roots of War and you're just trying to stay alive with a Kuma Garwood pairing, Stripe Bear is like the best answer, but even with that limited niche use, I think this guy's on the trash tier. All right, our second G1 war pet is the Polar Bear here, the Frost Bear, really built for Madeline and Shields. Never been impressed with this guy. Madeline sort of, you would only throw her into an infantry lineup at this point if you had no one else. I think this guy's on the trash tier as well, okay? Then we go to the G2 pet, the Bruin Bear here. Bruin Bear used to actually be pretty strong way back in the day. This is obviously the pet for Gorish and Skogul. If you were in the G2 scenario and you were rallying or garrisoning with Gorish, and back then we did, this was the best pet for that. However, unfortunately, this guy's long since seen its best days. If you have one of these built out right now and you still throw Gorish and Skogul out there, yeah, okay, I would use it. But Gorish and Skogul, they're not nearly as strong as they used to be, and there's lots of better pets for this. So I'll put this on the C tier, but I think it's going to end up towards the bottom of the C tier. Okay, our G3 infantry pet is the Moon Bear, really for Magro and Danfield, but it's some good versatility on this guy. You've heard me say this plenty of times before. This will work with Cav pets. I think putting on, in particularly the G3 Cav, this is still a good option. And, it does a good bit of damage. It's more of an offensive pet, more skill damage focused than sort of the counterattack of the other infantry pets. But I think it's still fine. We'll keep it on the B tier. I think towards the top of the B tier, really. Okay, our next pet is the Moss Rock. This guy is proving really, really resilient. Really the best pet for the G4 infantry heroes, and it's the pet that works with Kuma. Kuma's still the strongest hero in the game, making this guy an awesome pet choice, okay? Now, if you have Kuma and Laquan, or really Kuma and whoever in the open field, there is another option. You can go with the Poison Lizard, but if you are in the Rally Garrison meta, this guy is an excellent choice, in particular for the garrison. There is one other option there, but I think this guy is super strong. I think the Moss Rock is still the strongest war pet in the game, given its versatility, given that it is one of the premier choices for both the rally and the garrison. So I have this guy still on the S tier. Okay, and finally we have the Brimstone. This guy's honestly being a bit of a disappointment, and really the issue with this guy is that he needs Joran to work well. And Joran, so far, at least in my observation, has not slotted into the Rally Garrison meta, which makes this guy an underwhelming pick. Much like the Moss Rock, if you're in the open field, you can always use a Poison Lizard with your G5 infantry heroes. So if you had Joran in your rally, in your garrison, this guy would be the perfect pick. But because he's not really in the Rally Garrison meta all that much, this guy's slipping down. I have him on the B tier, and I actually have him below the Moon Bear here because the Moon Bear at least is a good Cav alternative pet. Okay, let's move on to the Mage pets, and we'll start with the Ice Lizard here. The Ice Lizard's always been terrible. Now, much like the Friendship Bear, the Ice Lizard does have one niche use. The Ice Lizard, its effect will stop enemy legions from entering their cities or entering a rally or garrison or something like that. So if you're trying to prevent city hopping, or you're just focused on stopping the enemy from reinforcing their bastion or reinforcing a rally, hitting the bastion, something like that, the Ice Lizard is still a good pick for that. Other than that, it's awful. I'm going to put it on the trash tier, but I do think it is the top of the trash tier. What a compliment. Top of the trash tier. Okay, the other pet is the worst pet in the game. This is the Thunder Lizard. Once again, our answer to the trivia question, what pet lacks a pet shop skill? There's only one. It is the Thunder Lizard. I think it's the worst pet in the game, clearly on the trash tier. Okay, now the last time I did this list, the Sapphire I had on the S tier, a couple of things have happened since then. First of all, we have the G4 Mage Pet. We'll talk about that in a little bit. It's proven to be the best Mage Pet for the G4 Mage Heroes. Okay, no surprise there. We also got the G5 Mage Pet, which is the best Mage Pet for the G5 Mage Heroes. Okay. But the thing about the Sapphire that really kept it around for like in a good position for a really long time is Lily Valen or Lily Thala, depending on how you match them, were the strongest Mage March for a very long time, and their best Mage Pet was the Sapphire. Okay, now we got two new Mage pairs, which are clearly better than Lily and whoever. In certain circumstances, Moo might be better, but she's kind of on par. But the bottom line is not only do we have a better Mage Pets for specific heroes, but Lily's kind of falling down the meta herself. Now, look, Lily's still in my lineup. She's not benched. I don't see her benched anytime that soon, but she's starting to get in danger here. And as a result, the Sapphire's fallen a bit. Now, the Sapphire has one other big advantage, and the Sapphire flies. And if you're a League of Order playing Celestials and you want that March to fly, the Sapphire is your best choice. So I still think it is pretty good. It is in the B tier for me, in the top of the B tier, but this is one of our biggest fallers. Used to be in the S tier, now it's all the way down to B. Okay, speaking of things that have fallen, we have the Shadow Phaedrake here, really built for the G2 Mage heroes. At this, it's still okay, but at this point, it's mostly inferior to the Sapphire in all circumstances. The one exception is, I think, if you're using Burt and Tohar, because they really do single target damage, not AoE damage. The Shadow Phaedrake helps a lot with that. But the problem is, like, Burt and Tohar, like, they're kind of clinging to the meta, and they're more vulnerable than Lily and Valen or Lily and Thea or whatever. And so this guy, I think, is substantially weaker than the Sapphire. I have it on the C tier, but he's ahead of the Bruin Bear at least. Okay, then we got the Seraphic, kind of a similar situation here. Never been impressed with the Seraphic. Thought it was like just definitively worse than the Sapphire ever since it came out, even for the G3 Mage Heroes, which it was designed for. And of course, it doesn't help the G3 Mage Heroes. In particular, Goat Girl, just weren't all that strong. I think it's very similar to the Shadow Phaedrake, but like a little bit even less use. So I have it on the C tier below that as well. Okay, then we got the Flaming Manticore. If you're using Young Ming, and really whoever, the Flaming Manticore is the best mage pet for Young Ming. Young Ming is firmly entrenched in the meta. Hard to see you benching him anytime soon if you've developed him at all. So I think the Flaming Manticore is still real good. I have it on the A tier. And we kind of have a similar story with the Magic Fox. As the Flaming Manticore is the best pet for the G4 mages, the Magic Fox is the best pet for the G5 mages. And they're super strong. Like, frankly, they're the best mages out there right now. Unsurprisingly, in a game like this, you're always going to have power creep, and the new generation heroes will tend to be the best. So I had the Magic Fox really strong. Now, the limitation on the Magic Fox is of course, it really only applies to one set of magic heroes. So when far in the future those magic heroes start to be a little less viable, the Magic Fox will fall off quickly at that point. But that's a long, long ways away. In fact, the G5 Mage Heroes should stick around longer than even Young Ming. So I have this on the A tier above the Flaming Manticore. Okay, moving on to the Archer pets. First, we got the Snow Peak Rock. The Snow Peak Rock is really your Kanara and Nico pet. Takes advantage of the defense break they inflict. Always been pretty good for that, because it has an ability to go off basically whenever defense breaks goes off. And Kanara and Nico, if you have them equipped, if you have the artifact, it is pretty good. The problem obviously is Kanara and Nico, they're RG1 archers and they're really outclassed at this point. So I kind of have this on the C tier, but above these other pets here. Okay. Then we got the Night Rock. This is really for the G2 mages. Much like Kanara and Nico, Sindrian and Freygar sort of have more limited use here. Now, the one thing is that Freygar does fly, and so if you have her as like your flying Wyvern Riders or whatever, and you actually use flying Wyvern Riders to fight with, the Night Rock is the right choice for that. So, okay, and if you have a Night Rock built out, it can be used with Magzay fairly well. It's not the best pet for Magzay, but, if you don't want to build their pet, this is pretty good for them. So I have this on C tier, but above the Snow Peak. Okay, which brings us to the G3 Archer pet, really the pet for Magzay. Works great with them, not great with anyone else. The thing about Mage is they're still super strong, still extremely relevant in the meta. Part of the reason they're so strong is they can also be really good mages, but they're still, at worst, the second best archer pair out there. And so I think this guy's sticking around for a while. I have him towards the top of the B tier, but because of the less viability, like the Sapphire can basically be used with every mages, whereas the Shadow Manticore really can only be used with Mage. I have him on the B tier below the Sapphire Phaedric. Okay, then we got our G4 Archer pet. Never been a big fan of the Barb Manticore. Never saw any reports that really stood out to me. The G4 Archers are fine. I'm not a big Archer player, but they sort of they're not as good as Megse. They're not as good as your G5 Archers. But, they're better than the earlier Archers, so I guess they're sticking around. At this point, I'd really put this guy towards the end of the B tier. He might be slipping to C tier at this point. I don't see the G4 Archers being benched super soon, but they're sort of on notice, maybe in a couple seasons. Okay, so that brings us to the G5 Archer pet, which is the Wind Weasel. I really like the G5 Archers. I don't like their Warpet. And so I think the Wind Weasel is kind of an interesting situation. It is the pet designed for them, and they are really strong, but it is sort of a pet that doesn't do that much. And I think there are other options out there. All that leads me to think, hey, this is probably a B tier pet, sort of in the middle of B tier. It's fine. It's not amazing. Okay, now switching to the Cav pets, and we'll start with the G1 Cav pet. That's the Golden Rock here. Remember, this thing triggers off the Passion buff. If you don't have Passion, it gives you Passion. If you already have Passion, it does damage to the enemy. The interesting thing about the Golden Rock is it's really designed for the G1 Cav heroes, Emrys, Bakshi, and even Alistar. But one of the G4 Cav heroes, Li Shanyan, also had the Passion mechanic, which meant that if you had Li Shanyan and you didn't want to build out the new Warpet, the Golden Rock was an excellent choice because the Golden Rock it basically slot in. Now, it's not nearly as strong as the G4 Cav pet, but it is still viable. So where does this put this? Well, the G1 Cav heroes, they're in my lineup right now, but they're the weakest in my lineup. And so when the G6 Cav out, I think they're getting cut. That would tend to put it on the C tier. But the fact that this guy can be used with a G4 Cav hero, okay, we got a little additional niche use there. And then on top of that, this guy flies. And if you heard my videos before, particularly with Flying Cav, there's not a lot of great options. And this guy sort of ends up being the least bad option out there. So that's an additional niche use case for it. So basically, this guy is either at the top of C tier or the bottom of the B tier. At this point, I have him at the top of the C tier, but he'll stick around if you really don't want to invest in a new pet. Okay, so we compare that to the G2 Cav pet. This is the Berserk Phaedric. Great for Frondel, not really great for a lot of other heroes. Now, it does work well with the G5 Cav hero Freya, so that's something, but she has a better Cav pet, so okay, kind of like the Golden Rock. This is basically like the Golden Rock, but in a slightly better situation. And in particular, if you're playing Eagles, the Berserk Phaedric is the one pet that works really well for you. So I think because of that, this is a tier above the Golden Rock, but sort of towards the bottom of B tier. I do think it is better than the Barb, though. Okay, so then we have the G3 Cav here, the Bladed Manticore, really designed for AoE Cav, in particular Urag. I have never been particularly impressed with the output on this pet. And in fact, if you are a degenerate Cav player, one of the things you might have done back in the day is instead of build this pet, build a stacked out Moonbearer, which could be used with Urag. But it is the pet designed for them. It works okay. Urag's not going anywhere. Urag's great. But of course, one of the reasons that Urag is great is because of all his skills. And one of the weaknesses of Urag is his Warpet isn't amazing. So I kind of have this on the B tier right with the Berserk Phaedric. I actually think the Berserk Phaedric is going to stick around a little bit longer because of its flying ability. So that's where I have the Blade Manticore right now. Okay, I see I had these out of order, so I'll just take them in the order they came. The next pet is the Auric Warhound. This guy's super strong. Hits 2 targets, does a ton of damage. Obviously great for the G4 Cav heroes, in particular Nea. Nea powers this all by herself. But this guy's still strong, even if you don't have the internal mechanic powering him, right? You can put this with other heroes. And what I've seen a lot of players do is use this with their infantry heroes because it is one of the hardest hitting Warpets out there. So because of that, it is very high up there. Now, I don't think this guy is as good as the Moss Rock in the Rally Garrison meta. I appreciate that other people have different opinions, but when I run the reports, when I am being rallied or garrisoned against an Auric Warhound, my Warpet beats them almost every time. This guy's still good, don't get me wrong. I don't think it is good as the Moss Rock, though. But you put on top of that the fact that this guy can be used with the G4 Cav heroes, so it's super strong. Those guys ain't going anywhere anytime soon. A good bit of versatility. I have this on the A tier and towards the top of the A tier. All right, now it comes to the G5 Cav Pet. This guy's amazing. This guy is the strongest Cav Pet in the game right now. And in particular with Agnar, it creates such beautiful synergy. This guy wrecks. When I send my Cav marches out, my G5 Cav outperform everything. Okay, you'd expect that. They outperform everything by a margin that is really kind of ridiculous because I have this guy so built out and because he synergized with both the G5 Cav heroes. Okay, so are there any downsides to this? A couple, right? You're not really going to have a Cav garrison most of the time, maybe in your city, nowhere else. And if you have a Cav garrison in your city, you're really using Li Shanyan. So maybe Li Shanyan and Freya together with this guy as the Warpet. Okay, that's pretty niche. Okay, so it's not really a garrison pet, except for in particularly unlikely scenarios. What about a rally? Yeah, it's a rally pet all the time. I launch Cav rallies like nobody's business. Now, if we're rallying something like a bastion or a city, we usually try to get an infantry rally in there first and a Cav rally second. There are exceptions. But if we're doing the Cav rally, this is the pet I use. It performs great. I have this on the A tier and higher than even the Auric. Okay, which brings us to our two generic pets. The first pet, obviously, is the Poison Lizard. Poison Lizard, always a great infantry pet, works with every infantry hero. If you saw my video a little while back, the only condition on the Poison Lizard is that your unit gets hit with attacks, and that's going to be every infantry legion ever. So this is going to stick around probably as long as the game sticks around. Okay, downsides to this, well, it only hits once a turn. But the other upside is that, it hits at range, and so far all the other infantry war pets only hit at melee, and so this guy, for the open field, you can make a strong argument that this guy is the best infantry war pet for the open field, okay? Now, its damage output is starting to trail off a little bit of the, the higher tier infantry heroes if you're in melee range, and this guy's never been a great pick for the Rally Garrison meta, but because this guy is still very solid for all infantry heroes, because there is at least an argument to be made that this guy is the best open field infantry pet there is, and because this guy should stick around basically as long as the game stick around, I have this on the A tier, right? Evergreen, pretty good, not as maybe as strong in the up close as some of these other infantry pets, but still really good. That's an A tier pet. And that finally brings us to the Sand Lizard. I think the Sand Lizard is the biggest riser from our last time we did this. Sand Lizards really gain a lot of popularity. I've come to really appreciate the Sand Lizard. It's really good for any ranged unit, right? This thing does not work well with melee units, but if you've got mages, if you've got archers, if you even have El Cav, super strong, because it goes off at the beginning of combat, and so you do not have to wait for the rage cycle. And so if you're in a scenario where you're moving back and forth, hitting and running, moving into range, moving out of range or whatever, Sand Lizard's awesome. And then on top of that, really the development we've seen in the game lately is we've seen more and more infantry units, just huge infantry lines. And so you take a lot of counterattack when you're hitting those, even from range. It really helps to have something out there to give you some sustain, to help heal that damage out. And the Sand Lizard's a great way to do that, okay? And like the Poison Lizard, the Sand Lizard, there's no reason this should ever go away. It heals you. And, on top of that, another bonus is, you can build this thing out as strong as you want, and it's not that expensive, right? All right, cons to this. Well, obviously the Sand Lizard doesn't do any damage, and in the moment, if you, let's say you're playing mages, the G5 mages, the Magic Fox really going to outperform the Sand Lizard, okay? But if you have a big ball of these, grouped up, it does a lot of healing. I like them. And like I mentioned in my Sand Lizard refresh a long time ago, if I had to do this all over again for my ranged marches, I just would have built Sand Lizards because they would have been cheap, they would have been easy, they would have been done, and I could have focused all my efforts, all my resources on the melee, the infantry, and the cav pets. So this guy's strong, he's viable, he's cheap to build, going to stick around a long time. I have him on the A tier, but below the Orc because the Orc does have that play where the Orc's in the Rally Garrison meta. Okay. All right, and that's where I have the Warpets right now today. This is sort of like if you were developing a new Warpet, what should you invest in? Only one Warpet in the S tier here because it is still, in my opinion, the best Warpet for the Rally Garrison meta. If you're not part of the Rally Garrison meta, I would not look to the Auric. I would look down below in some of these other pets here in terms of what you want to develop. Now, like I mentioned in the last time I do this, I'll probably do this roughly every time we get through a full generation of heroes, just tell you where I see the meta is right now. Anyway, that's all I got for you today, and until next time, you stay classy, Valorant.